I ran a poll on Twitter and everyone wanted to hear about my OCs again, so here we are. God knows why, because I can never tell whether I'm actually interesting enough to listen to when it comes to stuff like this, but I swear I'm trying. Last time I did one of these, I talked about the main hero characters in my comic synthesis, so today I wanted to give a bit of info on some other characters that we didn't get to touch on last time. I've been slowly developing them as the story's been going on, because as we all know, I can't plan for anything. If we're not winging it constantly, then something's wrong. I mean, Christ, I'm speedrunning the script right now. I'm literally recording this like a few hours before it's meant to be uploaded. Oopsie! Anyway, as well as the OCs, I've also been doing a bit of thinking and contextualizing as to how heroes in my universe actually function in society. So I'm gonna get into that when a specific character comes up, so look forward to that. We're gonna go into a bit of this and a bit of that, and basically anything that feels relevant. So if you're interested in hearing me talk more about my dumb fictional children, then please stick around. And if you feel like being really nice to me, you could always like and subscribe. Please and thank you. Also, spoiler warning, if you were thinking about reading Synthesis and haven't yet, this video will feature some light spoilers, just so you know. If this video ends up sparking your interest about the story, then I will be leaving both Tapas and Webtoon links in the description. Alright, let's begin. Okay, so the first character I want to get into is Alex. Alex, aka Pixel, is the 22-year-old IT technician slash living security camera of the Synthesis firm. They have the ability to convert their own body into electrical energy and travel through any electrical appliance, and they can even operate said appliances to an extent while traveling through them. This, however, does not mean that they can fully control said appliances because, as we all know, turning a computer on and off isn't exactly the same as hacking it. Alex's skills lie more in their technical know-how, more so than their actual powers. As such, they tend to help G and Dennis keep the firm running behind the scenes instead of working on the ground. Also, fun fact, I actually based their hairstyle and their love of sweatpants on my own partner, who also has a love of sweatpants. I love you, sweetheart, though they did cut their hair a while ago now. Also, if you noticed that Alex and Pixel were references to smartphone AIs, then I'm not going to confirm that because they're probably listening to me. Anyway, much like their fashion sense, Alex is very easygoing and it takes a lot to get them upset. They're probably one of the few characters besides Roy who doesn't have some kind of attitude problem now that I think of it. They're very touchy-feely as well. They like to hug people, they like physical contact, and sometimes that can come across as them not really understanding personal space. They do, but I like to think that Alex is the kind of character where if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So if you were to give them permission to hug you, you would probably get bear hugged. But yeah, Alex likes to do everything they can to help people. That said, because they obviously have such a high role in the firm when it comes to things like security, they can also be a little bit nosy, I think. They probably know far more about all of the heroes and staff than even they themselves know. Also, another fun little fact too is that Alex was actually the main character for a student film that I made for my master's course, which was really fun. The film went through a lot of developments before I settled on the overall story, but originally it was going to be a piece about internet escapism, and I was going to show this transition of real life to digital by doing that old 2000s cartoon thing where the digital space was all in 3D. Unfortunately, I still have a ways to go with 3D animation, and I was on a pretty strict deadline, so the concept and plot evolved a lot before everything got finalized. So yeah, that's Alex. There's not much to them quite yet, since we haven't really seen a lot of them, but don't you worry, you'll be finding out more soon. Just you wait, I've got some very big plans for Alex. The next character I want to talk about is one that a few people have mentioned that they're not a big fan of because of how she's interacted with some of the others, and that is G. G is effectively the manager of the firm. She's the one who keeps everything running and does her best to keep everyone on track. She is very straight-laced, very professional, and doesn't really have the patience for everyone else's shenanigans. She's basically a girl boss? I'm guessing? I don't know. Is that the right word? Because of these attributes, I think a few people have this impression that she is kind of a Karen archetype, and I think to an extent I was going to go in that route, but then I got a job in admin and I think I ended up becoming her. So now I've kind of found myself empathizing with her character a lot more, which I really wasn't expecting. But no, I think my intention for G now is that she is trying her best to keep the firm afloat and is also trying to be as fair as she can despite that. But the thing that I've learned about office jobs is that because you are viewing people through a screen and aren't really spending much time on the ground, it can sometimes seem like the office folk are picking on the workers when it's very likely that they are probably just as, if not more, stressed than they are. And it's a shame because they just want to do the job the same as anyone else, but the only way they can do that is if everyone else does their job too. But unfortunately, this can lead to some situations like Abigail's where it's very clear that she's unhappy, but there aren't many resources available to really cope with it effectively other than to just tell her to push through it, which, as we all know, You know, telling a depressed person to just get over it doesn't really help, like, at all. And the really unfortunate side effect of this is that G is the one who basically has to act like a bitch to keep her on her toes. She knows that Abigail is struggling, but she still needs her to do her job, and G isn't a therapist. Plus, she has about a million other things to also be stressing about. I mean, just think about it. Would you want to be constantly babying another co-worker at your job? Simply put, G is working really hard towards everyone's benefit, even if it seems a bit harsh to others, but it isn't out of malice. Something I really like about G's character is that even though she herself doesn't have any powers, she has that kind of aura that demands respect from people, which is seen pretty much as soon as she's introduced. So far we've only really seen the girl boss businesswoman side of G, so I'm quite eager to get into some of her more vulnerable moments. I think readers will warm up to her more once we get into that side of things later on in the story. For now, I hope that you can put up with our ladyship for just a bit longer. Third character is one who I think people are happy to be seeing again now in the comic, as he hasn't really appeared much since the prologue, and that is our boy Plasmo. Plasmo, or Martin, yeah, his name's Martin, is kind of like Fawkes' antithesis in a sense. He's the main antagonist of the series that we know of. He's kind of goofy, but is also still pretty competent at what he does. Because of Fawkes' recent decline, he does tend to let his guard down around her more than he probably should, but he is also very quick on his feet and is good at getting out of certain situations. His main role a lot of the time is to actually behave as a distraction, while the rest of the baddies do what they need to do to escape the scene. He's basically the diversion expert. The way that I'm approaching Plasmo is that, like Fawkes, being a mercenary isn't this super cool title, it's literally just a job, and because of this he does tend to put on a lot of theatrics to fit with his identity. He monologues, he lets Fawkes do her thing before smacking her down, you know, things like that. Visually, I ended up retconning him a bit because he was originally blonde. I think it was to offset the orange that was already in his costume, but honestly, I think I prefer him ginger. It just feels better for some reason. He was also a lot older too. He was originally going to be in his mid-40s to early 50s, but at the time I wasn't too great at drawing older characters, so I ended up aging him down a bit to around age 40. You can still see remnants of this in his forehead wrinkles and stuff, which I'm pretty glad I kept in because they kind of help him to look a bit distinct. The unfortunate thing about Plasmo is that in the story he is definitely the result of a system that lets people slip through the cracks, but that's not to say that he isn't to blame for the things that he does. He still actively engages in villainy, and that shouldn't be forgotten, and I don't particularly want to make him a sympathetic villain for no reason or as an easy way out, but I am a strong believer of putting as much thought into why your characters behave the way they do and what contributes to that as possible, whether they be active or passive contributions, all while still trying to give the character those small hints of humanity that readers can cling to. For Plasmo, I don't know why, but I really picture him being like an annoyed dad kind of character. Again, with the whole antithesis thing with Fawkes, she is unwillingly being made to mentor humour, but with Plasmo, it feels like he would be the opposite. He would be all too happy to have someone to basically boss around and also dote on, you know? Having someone else to be concerned about kind of focuses him in a sense. And speaking of someone Plasmo gets to boss around, that leads me onto my next and newest character in the story, Duplicat. Fun fact, one video I'm hoping to do once I find out where to watch the episodes is do some redesigns of the costumes from Invincible, and that idea was definitely spurred on from finding out that Invincible has a character called Duplicate. Yeah, that's just one of the issues with names that use puns. Someone else is bound to have a similar idea, but you know, it's fine, I think they're different enough concept-wise. Duplicat, or Katrina, is a newly defected villain who is currently working as Plasmo's right-hand woman. Originally, she worked as a hero in the middle of the country, but disappeared 6 months prior to the beginning of the story, only to pop back up in Lower Ridge having switched sides. The exact reason she's done this hasn't been explored yet in the story, but don't worry, it's coming. The concept for Kat's powers and visual direction is that she can split in two, one side more introverted and the other more extroverted. This isn't really meant to be an allegory for anything, it was just the way I decided to approach it when taking her aesthetics into account, and if anyone wants to interpret her in a certain way, that's completely fine, but I personally don't want to put any specific labels onto her that I don't fully understand. Just want to make that clear. But the cool thing is that the reason she can split in two and not multiple copies is because I thought it would be really cool to construct her civilian outfits in a way that they would look visually pleasing as both combined in separate outfits. Literally, that's the only reason that I wanted her to only split into two characters, because I just want to mess around with outfits. Obviously, as of right now, we've only seen her in a very simple jumpsuit, but I'm actually really excited to play around with this aspect of her design, particularly with hairstyles, because the idea of doing a half up, half down that then splits into fully up for one and down for the other just seems really cool, you know? She's definitely someone I'm really excited to explore and develop as the story goes on. I'm thinking she's probably a bit of a typical party girl, maybe a bit crush crazy, crazy. Definitely someone who feels very comfortable in lively situations, I think, but who knows? We still have a bit of time to fully think that over. There's not much else I can quite tell you yet about Kat, because obviously she's so new, but we do have one more interesting character to cover. And the final character that I'm going to talk about is one that I think a few people are equally eager and also kind of dreading to learn more about. And that kind of makes a lot of sense when you realise his name actually derives from the embodiment of dread in Greek mythology, and that is Deimos. Just before I get into what Deimos' deal is, I want to quickly go over some info about how I'm planning to approach the concept of heroes from different firms and the general world building behind this. So this kind of felt like a bit of a light bulb moment, but basically I wanted to try and think about how heroes would function in a specifically British/European setting, because while it's all good trying to copy the American or even Japanese model, I'm not American or Japanese, and the UK is all I've ever known, so it felt like some things may not come across properly, if you get what I mean. I would imagine that British superheroes specifically would be a lot more moody and just generally sarcastic, as opposed to the more optimistic American or Japanese superheroes. So as a result of that, I thought that the general attitude to superheroes would also be pretty different, so what felt like the most logical way to approach it was to interpret hero firms in the universe similarly to football clubs. Now, huge disclaimer, I don't know fucking anything about football, just so you know. But effectively, you have some pretty huge and well-known clubs, the big leagues if you will, and then you have like the lesser-known clubs that are not only lesser known by the general population, but they also earn less, obviously. It's also common practice to buy and sell players, basically, to be on certain teams for often obscene amounts of money. So as we're talking about a specific group of highly qualified individuals with very unique capabilities, this comparison just seemed to work pretty perfectly. With this in mind, you can't have a club without club owners and managers, the ones who negotiate and buy their teams, and that is where Deimos fits into the equation. Deimos is basically the embodiment of those tycoons who are just obsessed with building a little empire for themselves in their desired field. He is very self-assured, he is ambitious, and he will do whatever he can to get what he wants. And you can definitely see this in the way that he interacts with G. He's very in the know about the firm's situation and sees that as an opportunity to essentially do a bit of scalping for his own firms. Him and G do happen to have a bit of history. If you've read the comic, then you might recall that G used to be Deimos' secretary some time ago. This established relationship basically means that whenever they are in the same room together, things can get a bit awkward, especially regarding some events that I will be getting round to soon, so don't you worry about that. But yeah, Deimos is a very interesting one. Again, a lot of these characters that I've talked about today are still quite new, so there's only so much that I can tell you without spoiling things, but hopefully that gives them a bit of an air of mystery and entices you to read the comic, so I hope that it's piqued your interest. And that, I believe, is everything I have the energy to talk about for this one. There are still some interesting OCs to come once the story progresses a bit further, but I hope you enjoyed listening to my rambling in the meantime. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Stay safe everyone. Bye!